Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. So we've been talking a lot about eczema and allergies. We talked about dust mite allergy, that more environmental allergy picture last week. And today I want to talk about something we commonly see in kids. It's when so-called healthy foods trigger symptoms. And today I specifically want to talk about FODMAPs and fructose. We could also, and we are going to cover histamine next week, but things like salicylates and amines could be in here as well. But I really want to focus on FODMAPs and fructose today. And it's important to understand that these sort of issues, digestive issues generally in kids, can present both as a standalone, but we do commonly see them co-occurring in kids with allergies and eczema as well. So they can sort of contribute and have some of the same underlying sort of factors at play. And these sort of issues can be quite confusing for parents and even professionals. We often see, these sorts of issues go undiagnosed or wrongly diagnosed, particularly as IBS, which tends to be this blanket term when the digestive system is upset, it's unhappy, but we're not really sure why. IBS will often be diagnosed. There is definitely more of that connection between IBS and FODMAP issues, that are being recognised by more and more professionals in the medical space. So that's a good thing because we need to sort of know why someone has irritable bowel syndrome. And this definitely overlaps from children to adults. We see FODMAP issues occurring in adults really regularly as well. So let's talk about, first of all, I guess I want to dive into the difference between allergy and intolerance, I think is important to point out here. So when we're talking about food allergies, they are immune mediated. They're generally immediate. So the symptoms are immediately after eating a particular food. The symptoms are severe, they can be life-threatening, whereas a food intolerance or food sensitivity or even a malabsorption issue when we're talking about fructose are more of that digestive processing issue. So they're more localized to the gut, and it's the gut that is struggling to process those particular foods. And if you don't know what FODMAPs are, they are, FODMAP is basically an acronym for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So these are groups of short-chain carbohydrates and sugar alcohols. So they're carbohydrates contained in what we would really think of as healthy foods. And for some people, they experience intestinal symptoms from ingestion of these carbohydrates. And that's because in certain individuals, these carbohydrates are not well absorbed in the body. They remain in the digestive tract for longer periods, and they draw water into the intestines, which causes the symptoms, the bloating, the gas, the irregular bowels, and those sorts of things. And the carbohydrates contained in these foods can be metabolized by the bacteria that normally reside in the bowel, and that causes a lot of the symptoms, the gas, the bloating, and the wind. Now, the problem with just removing all of these foods from the diet is, one, that can help short term, and we're going to go into some examples of some of these foods in a moment, but these foods are really good sources of prebiotic fibers. And when we remove all of these FODMAP foods from the diet, we're missing out on those prebiotic fibers that are so essential to our overall gut health and our overall microbiome health. So yes, avoiding high FODMAP foods for a period of time can be helpful at getting on top of symptoms and while we improve that gut function so that over time the gut can tolerate more of these foods, but we really don't want to be going on a low FODMAP diet long term, ideally. So kids that have issues with FODMAPs will be reacting to a whole heap of different unrelated foods. Like, it can be pretty hard for parents to pick up on because FODMAPs are included in so many different foods, including things like fruits, particularly those high fructose fruits like apples and pears and watermelon and mango, but there's a whole heap of other fruits that can contribute as well. Fructans as well. So again, these are contained in certain fruits and vegetables such as broccoli and asparagus and beetroot and corn and onion and garlic. A lot of people, one of the key sort of clues to FODMAPs is that people will react to onion and garlic. But also in this fructans group are wheat cereals, rye, and there's some nuts in there as well. And then there's the galactans. So that is like all the legumes, the chickpeas, lentils, soybeans can be a problem as well. Then there's lactose. So people will have issues with dairy products. And so you can see that there is a lot of variation in the foods that are sort of under this FODMAP umbrella or that are high in FODMAPs. And really the only way to know whether FODMAPs are an issue, yes, there's particular symptoms that can be red flags, but we can do a bit of a trial on a low FODMAP diet to see if symptoms improve. But it can be quite tricky to stick to. So that is something to keep in mind. So people with issues with FODMAPs will generally have that irritable bowel type picture. They'll be, they can get diarrhea, they can get constipation, pain, bloating, irregular bowels are really the key sort of symptoms. And all of that happens because these carbohydrates are fermenting in the gut, which causes all the symptoms. And as I said earlier, there is often this correlation with these more sort of like these food intolerances, sensitivities like FODMAPs and eczema and allergies. They often co-occur. It doesn't mean that FODMAPs cause eczema, but it does tell us that the gut, it sort of points back to the fact that the gut is a big part of the picture. And so we're looking at things like, the integrity of that gut barrier, the diversity of the microbiome, and the way that the gut and the immune system communicate and affect the way that both the gut and the immune system function. And it's really important also to be, thinking about that gut immune link in a broader sense. So although food intolerance issues like FODMAPs aren't driven by the immune system as allergies are, when the gut is unhappy and, you have all of these gut symptoms because there's an issue with FODMAPs, that is going to affect the immune system, the way the immune system sort of functions, because we know that, 80% of the immune system is located in the gut. So there's all, these links that we need to be aware of if we're sort of noticing that our kids have issues with these high FODMAP foods. Now, there is a bit of a crossover with fructose issues as well. So some kids might just have an issue with fructose. not with FODMAPs sort of overall. So kids with issues with fructose, like fructose malabsorption, which is pretty common in kids where they struggle to break down that fructose, the symptoms are very similar to kids with FODMAP issues. So they will get, that irritable bowel, the bloating, the wind, and they can get a lot of fatigue with fructose malabsorption as well. It's often a little bit clearer because, there's that clear link between fruit and symptoms, whereas FODMAPs can be a bit harder to figure out because, a child is reacting to a whole range of different foods. But with fructose, it's important to note, yes, fruit is key, but even things like honey are high in fructose, or high fructose corn syrup, which can be contained in processed foods, and also, dried fruit juices, fruit smoothies can be problematic as well. So the picture or the story I often hear from parents is that, they can see that their child is reacting to something with all these digestive symptoms that they've got going on. So they remove some of the common culprits from the diet, maybe alongside a medical practitioner or a natural health practitioner, or maybe even on their own through their own research. They remove things like dairy and gluten, but that doesn't seem to do the trick. It might help because both dairy and wheat are within those FODMAP foods. So you might get some relief, but then, you're noticing that your child is reacting to, a healthy stir fry that you've cooked, which has garlic and onion in it, and maybe some of those high fructan vegetables. Or you're noticing that your child's reacting to hummus or lentil soup because of those legumes as well. So for those kids that are for those families where it's feeling like your child is reacting to more and more and more foods, FODMAPs can be one of the things that is at play. So FODMAPs can be really tricky to navigate alone. There are some really good online resources, like the Monash University have a FODMAP app and a really great website that really help you to navigate it, because the other tricky thing with FODMAPs is that there are high FODMAP foods, there are moderate FODMAP foods, and there are low FODMAP foods. So your child might tolerate like a little bit of garlic and onion, for example, but, they can be pushed over the edge as well. So it can be tricky to know what to include a little bit of, what to eliminate altogether. And as I said, we really want to focus where the focus really needs to be with people with FODMAP issues is to restore that gut function, that digestive function. And that can look a bit different depending on the child, in terms of what particular supplements or food strategies we might use will vary from child to child. So there's not sort of this one size fits all approach when we're looking at, restoring and optimizing that gut function so that someone can start to tolerate those high FODMAP foods again. The other really interesting thing with FODMAPs is that some people will react more to certain groups within those fermentable carbohydrates. So when we are looking at taking someone through like a low FODMAP diet, and then we're reintroducing the high FODMAP foods back into the diet, we can often see patterns where they're okay with the fructose, for example, but they're really not okay with the galactans. So often people will have certain groups that they will more strongly react to within, that overall FODMAP umbrella of foods, if you like. And so that can be really helpful to know, okay, well, my child reacts to fructose, but they don't react to the legumes, because then we can get some of those really healthy prebiotic fibers back into the diet. And while kids are on a low FODMAP diet, if that is the way that sort of needs to go in the short term, we can also get them onto like prebiotic supplements to make sure that their microbiome, stays nice and healthy, or we can improve the health of that microbiome while reducing or eliminating some of those, really important prebiotic sources. So what I really want you to know from this episode is a low FODMAP diet can be helpful for kids with those IBS type symptoms short term, but we want to make sure that we are improving that gut function and improving the health of the gut microbiome, that gut barrier integrity, while we are reducing or removing those high FODMAP foods. A low FODMAP diet is really only healthy short term while we get on top of that gut function. And so if your child is reacting to some of these foods that are sounding familiar, or they're on a low FODMAP diet, I do recommend that you work with a practitioner to help you navigate that and to start to reintroduce those higher FODMAP foods as soon as possible, and or at least get on some supplements that are going to fill the gaps, particularly when it comes to those important prebiotic fibers. And just as a little reminder, or if you're not aware, prebiotics are the fuel source for the good bacteria within the gut. And they're a really good fuel source for the gut in general as well. So without those prebiotic fibers in the diet or in supplement form, your child's gut microbiome is going to go downhill. So we don't want to just restrict and keep pulling more foods out of their diet. We really want to optimize that gut function when it comes to both fructose issues and FODMAP issues as well. So I hope that has given you some information to sort of work with, whether it is for your child or for yourself. And as I said, FODMAP issues, fructose issues, are commonly seen in kids with eczema and allergies as well, even though they are not immune driven. That disruption of gut function can really, affect the immune system sort of long term. And that's the last thing we want, because here in the Southern Hemisphere, we are on the brink of, heading into autumn and winter. So we really want to make sure we're doing all we can to keep that immune system nice and healthy, and getting on top of gut symptoms is a big part of that. I hope this has been helpful. If you know of anyone else who may be on a low FODMAP diet or may have some of these symptoms that I've been talking about in this episode, please forward this episode on to them so they've got this information as well. And I am going to be back next week talking more about another tricky intolerance allergy issue, which is histamine. So I'll be back next week with that episode. I'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.